Alrighty, welcome everybody to another mini Econ Chats where we're trying to give you a little taste of some of the information that you're going to need to know to not only be successful on the milestone and in your economics class, but maybe, hopefully, possibly even in life. And we're going to be discussing unemployment with this little mini chat, mainly focusing again on standard SSEMA 1. Looks like this. That's right, where we need to be able to macroeconomics illustrate the means by which economic activity is measured. Remember, we are identifying and describing the macroeconomic goals of steady economic growth, stable prices, and full employment. And that's right, full employment is another goal. And of course, in order to gauge whether or not, remember macroeconomics, how is the economy doing? We're backing up, looking at the economy as a whole. How can we tell if we're at full employment? We have to look at unemployment. If you take a look at the standard, it looks like this. C tells you need to be able to define the unemployment rate. All right, we'll do that. And then, of course, E tells you need to be able to identify structural, seasonal, cyclical, and frictional unemployment. That's right, not all unemployment is the same. So we're going to define unemployment for you and make sure you know the differences between those different types of unemployment. So let's go ahead and get started now. When we talk about the unemployment rate, a lot of people are kind of surprised to find out that we're not just talking about people without a job, right? Here, in fact, is your definition for unemployment rate, your official definition. It is the percentage of the workforce without a job and actively seeking one. So right there, you should go ahead and say that there's a couple of different qualifiers to tell you it's not just people who don't have a job. For example, we have to look at the workforce. Well, who is in the workforce? And then it isn't just people who don't have a job. It's also somebody who's unemployed, but also actively trying to become employed. So we look at those two things and we can get a better idea of unemployment. Now, again, remember, this is an indicator, something that could potentially tell us how is our economy doing. So we look at the workforce, the percentage of the workforce. Well, what is this workforce? Well, it depends on what you are looking for. Well, in the United States, at least, we consider the workforce to be those that are 16 years of older, that are working at least, typically, 1 hour a week 1 hour per week with pay. And they also need to be people that are, again, looking for jobs. So, for example, my 6-year-old, my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old is not included in the workforce. Now, they don't have a job, but they are not old enough to be counted. Same way with my parents, who are both retired. They are in their late 60s. They are not counted in the workforce because they've retired. They're not actively seeking a job. So unemployment rate basically measures how many people out there can work, are able to work. For example, in that workforce, you're not going to find people who are incarcerated. We don't count them. We don't count people who may have some sort of emotional or physical impairment that doesn't allow them to work. We don't count people who won the lottery and don't need to work anymore. We don't count people who just give up. Sometimes we call them the people that are just kind of, they just give up, the people that are not going to find a job any longer because they've been looking for years and years, for example, and they can't find the right job. They're not counted either. So again, this is an indicator. And remember, we have to look at a long list of them. We have to look at GDP, we have to look at inflation, we have to look at unemployment, poverty, and all that to get an idea. Because if we were just to say, hey, unemployment's falling, that must mean the economy's great, we might not be right. Likewise, if we say, well, unemployment's going up, that must mean the economy's going down, we might not be right there either. Because it's all about who we're looking at, who is working, who does have a job. And then, again, you might be employed, but you have say a master's degree in accounting, and you being employed is working at McDonald's. You are what's called underemployed. But again, according to the government, we think that you are employed, so therefore unemployment numbers are going to come down. That may not necessarily mean, though, that everybody's working in jobs that they want to work in. So you can see why isolating a indicator like unemployment can sometimes not be the best way to determine how an economy is doing. But unemployment, again, the basic thing you need to know, the percentage of the labor force that is jobless and actively seeking work. But now, what is this jobless? Why are you jobless? Why are you unemployed? There's differences to those. Let's go ahead and hit that up now. All right, so as that standard says, you have to understand and be able to kind of identify and understand the difference between 4 different types of unemployment. Again, not all unemployment is the same. The 4 types you need to know: frictional, structural, cyclical, and seasonal. So let's make sure you have an understanding of what all 4 of these mean. Frictional, typically what you're looking for is somebody that takes their time. So, for example, somebody who loses their job, they have a couple of different options. They can run right back out and get into the job market. They can go back out and get into the next available job that comes available to them. Some people, on the other hand, though, may lose their job, and maybe they have savings, right? Maybe they're waiting to find something else. Some people are unemployed and not working because they are going back to school. For example, maybe somebody's a teacher, wants to become a lawyer. I quit my job, I lose my job, I leave my job, and I go back to school so that I can train to become a different or to enter a different profession. So that would be frictional. It's somebody that's not jumping right back into it, but instead they're taking their time to get into the market. Again, it might be because they're waiting for the right opportunity to come up. It might be because they're going back to school. It might be because they don't need to necessarily have a job right this second. So they are frictionally unemployed. As I rub my hands together, I'm creating friction, and that's how I want you to remember it. Not jumping right back into the market, but instead, because of different reasons, not necessarily taking a job right away. They are unemployed because they are waiting to find the right position. The next one is structural. And again, that one is kind of in the title as well. Structural, I want you to think structure. I want you to think about knowledge. I want you to think about skills. I want you to think about abilities. Okay? What I'm talking about here is that sometimes people don't have a job, not because they're waiting to find the right job, but instead they don't have the ability to perform certain tasks. One of the classic examples is somebody who's like a typewriter repairman. They may have had the skills to be a wonderful typewriter repairman in the 80s. Well, in 2018, those skills don't match up to the available jobs. Not many people have typewriters for these people to work on. Also, you might be unemployed because you don't have the education necessary to fill those needs. There are a lot of new jobs that have been created within the past few years. A lot of jobs with green technology, a lot of jobs with dealing with certain types of engineering and new science-based type kind of professions. And people just don't have, in large part, the skills to fill those positions. They are unemployed because they don't have the structure, the knowledge, the base, the understanding in order to fill those jobs. The next one is cyclical. And what you should be pointing out there is that the root word being cycle. And that's going to deal with something called the business cycle, which we'll get to on the next one. The business cycle, though, is basically just means the economy's doing well, then the economy's falling. Then the economy's doing well again, then it's falling again. And the economy's doing well again, then it's falling again. Doing well again and falling again. Well, it's when the economy is falling, is that when the economy is not doing well, we tend to have periods of, say, recession, and people begin to lose their jobs. You know, for example, when we went through in 2008 what former President Obama used to call the greatest economic recession of our country's history, what you saw were people during this recession didn't build as much. You know, we weren't building as many houses, for example. Well, what that meant was because we're not building houses because the economy's falling, you start losing jobs for electricians and plumbers and painters and roofers and everybody that's going to be working on it. So these people, if you're cyclically unemployed, are losing your job not because you're waiting, or you don't have a job because you're waiting for the right job. It's not that you've lost your job or don't have a job because you don't have the skills or abilities. It's because it's just a downturn in the business cycle. The economy is just falling. And because of that, there's going to be repercussions. And that's why you've lost your job. The very last one is seasonal, and that's typically the easiest for people to realize, and that deals with the seasons. There are certain times of year where people have jobs. For example, in November at the mall, they tend to hire a bunch of people because they're anticipating the Christmas season or the holiday season buying rush. Well, then come January, when the holiday season has gone away, people tend to lose their jobs. You don't see many lifeguards in Georgia working at outdoor pools in January or February. Why? Because the season. It's just a bad time. Obviously, farm-based labor, a lot of them are seasonally unemployed. They work during a certain time of the year, and once that time of the year is over, they've lost their job. They're not working, so they would be seasonally unemployed. So when you're looking at the 4 different types, you think about frictional. Friction, I'm taking my time to find the right job. That's why I don't have a job. Structural, I don't have the structure, I don't have the skills, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the understanding to fill the jobs that are available. Cyclical, it's just a downturn in the business cycle. We've had a bad time and people are losing their jobs. Seasonal, it's just the time of year. All right, there you go. Unemployment. Remember, unemployment rate, percentage of people who are jobless but actively seeking work. Remember the 4 types of unemployment. That's what you need to know for that standard. If you have any problems, make sure you let somebody know. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you later.